Unexpected. I'm Joshua Slocum. This is the show where we talk about politics, culture, and relationships through a psychological lens. First up, little housekeeping. I misspoke twice last week in a very annoying way. Kyle Rittenhouse shot 3 people, but he only killed 2 people. I said he killed 3. I was wrong, and I said it twice. You guys have no idea what it's like to sit there and watch yourself on camera after you've already recorded a mistake, knowing that you can't correct the mistake. But thanks for pointing it out. I did know that, but my brain and tongue weren't working together. So I want to give you a little bit of a preview of what we're going to talk about during this episode. We're going to cover COVID vaccine mandates and responses from the U.S. courts against Joe Biden's attempt to force private businesses and healthcare workers to vaccinate. We're going to talk about Australia losing its bloody mind and going full fascist. We're going to talk about anti-white racism from narcissistic black people because no one else will talk about it and somebody needs to. And we're going to go back to our obsession with language. If you recall from a couple of episodes ago, we went over a CBC, Canadian Broadcast Corporation, article that was all about hair and gender and how walking into a barbershop was the bravest thing that so many of these people had done. Well, the CBC, in its quest to reach the pinnacle of wokeness, has now given us basically a lexicon of words that we can't say because they cause harm. So we're going to have a little fun with that. First, an update. You recall the story that we are still tracking about the book Genderqueer, the comic book / graphic novel that is in American public school libraries and in a local high school local to me, Essex High School, that is basically cartoon drawings of explicit sex and encourages young women to see themselves as men and to fantasize about having body parts they don't have, to dissociate, and to invest all sorts of erotic feelings in strap-on dildos, which we are shown in graphic detail being filleted. I understand through certain trustworthy sources that the principal of the Essex High School is aware of this story. They're aware of this show. They're aware of what I've said about it. I've tried to make them aware, of course, by tagging them on Twitter. And my sources told me that the response is that what I am doing is an attack on the LGBTQIA+ community. Yes, that was the acronym. If you happen to be watching, Principal, I don't know your name. I'm a gay guy. It's not an attack. It's about child pornography. It's about unhealthy stuff in your school. Not an attack. Another concerned citizen has been writing to the Essex School Board. I want to share something. Sorry for knocking the microphone, folks. Dear Essex School Board, an email similar to this one went out to an incomplete list earlier today. I thank you in advance for taking this request seriously. The above referenced title is on your library bookshelf, and I'm requesting it be removed immediately. Your school board and school owe the community answers regarding criteria for reading material. To have such overt, objectionable material reaching our children is unacceptable. This title contains multiple graphic sexual images. Impressionable teens being able to read and view these, including blowjobs, vagina slime, and masturbation at school, is a breach of fundamental rights of parents to raise children as they see fit. Sexual morality education is a parent-guardian responsibility, not activist teachers or school boards. We ask our educators to please stay in their lane. Genderqueer would be categorized as child pornography if there were a genre box to select. By allowing this book on your shelf, you're demonstrating tacit approval of this material. Yes, I agree. And we will continue to follow this story and see if there's any response other than behind closed doors complaining about gay people like me attacking what they believe is my own community. Sorry, I'm fiddling with my earpiece, folks. Kevin tells me, actually, I have screwed up ears. These flesh-colored earpieces are supposed to be a universal fit, but I'm one of the minority of people who has a really strangely shaped ear, so it keeps popping out. Sorry about that. I want to give you a little bit of reader mail, too. This was a comment left on YouTube after our show last week where we talked about the straw man attack on Kyle Rittenhouse, and it's from somebody named Goondocks War Council. Quote, "You ask why the media/left is motivated to smear Kyle despite the clear facts of self-defense. The answer is because the left is systematically trying to make resisting them illegal. And to them, Kyle was in Kenosha to resist them. He was there to protect against rioters, but the left sees rioters as being on their side. They don't care about the actual facts of the case because in their mind, Kyle was already guilty of the most egregious violation from the get-go, trying to resist the left's street violence. They wanted Kenosha to be another test case establishing that if you resist the mob, you will go to jail. They want to scare us into not showing up to protect our communities from them the next time their thugs take to the streets to voice their anger. This is not the only case illustrating the trend. Consider the case in Portland, where a man was prosecuted for pulling his handgun out defensively after being attacked by an Antifa mob. Consider the McCloskeys in St. Louis. Consider how Proud Boys are prosecuted vigorously and defamed in the media, while Antifa have charges dropped and the media whitewashes them as either non-existent or, if existing, then the good guys. It's clear that the overarching goal of all of this is the criminalization of resistance. The activist district attorneys do the work on the legal end, while the media does propaganda work to try to sell the outcome they want. This is similar to the left's long-standing attempts to shut down argumentative resistance, as opposed to physical resistance, to the left, such as by labeling dissident speech violence, censoring wrongthink, and so on. Well, I completely agree. I see it this way too. And it's been a really bitter pill to swallow, looking at how many people that I would have considered to be just ordinary people in the mainstream, maybe lean to the left, maybe they're right in the mainstream center, who are unable to see this and who do see protesters, they do see people who defend themselves against rioters as the problem. I don't know where we go from this, but well spotted. And we're going to take a quick break before we go on to the next segment because we got some heavier stuff to talk about, but I want to share something with you about how today started and the fact that look how giving I am. Even after having a harm committed to me, I'm still bringing you a show. This is my lunch box. Do you see this charring on here? So I pick up lunch and I bring it in, and it's cold by the time I get here. Stick it in the microwave. When I hear the microwave beeping, I go over and I look at it, and the light inside is flickering. It's sort of like in that movie Poltergeist, you know. So, of course, my first thought is, this is one of those Alexa-powered microwaves. This must be one of those ridiculous things where it's trying to talk to me, so I'm going to have to talk back to it. I'll walk over to it. Oh, no. No, the light that's flickering inside the microwave is flames. Big flames and smoke. It was so flamey in there you would have thought I was inside the microwave. Well, I thought I was heating up a cheeseburger, and I left a mayonnaise packet in there that had a little bit of tinfoil in it, and the whole thing went to hell. So, you're welcome. We're going to have a show anyway. See you on the other side of the break.
For more conversation on the dark and disordered psychology that shapes today's cultural and political left, subscribe to our weekly audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Google Podcasts, and virtually anywhere else you get your podcasts. Let's learn to recognize these dynamics and call them what they are. Subscribe to Disaffected to learn how to break the spell.
We now have a bonus for our supporters. You can help the Disaffected podcast grow and receive invitations for our off-air Zoom hangouts by becoming a supporting member on Patreon or Subscribestar. Patreon users, go to patreon.com/disaffected. Subscribestar users, you can find us at subscribestar.com/disaffected. Check out our webpage at disaffected.fm for the complete list of ways you can help support us, and thank you. Button, because every person who does helps us out in the algorithm, and I would really appreciate it. And also, like I've said before, if you like the show, but you don't want to be seen liking the show, tell a friend privately. Just share it with one friend. Word of mouth is what's helping us grow. Thanks, everybody. And throughout this show, I'd like you to keep in mind a concept called collective narcissism. This seems to be becoming a term of art in some psychological researchers to describe, I don't think it's describing a new phenomenon. I think it's a different way of describing something that we've always seen in humans. It doesn't necessarily mean that anybody we're talking about has a full-on cluster B personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. They might, and some of them do. But of course, the majority of people don't. Collective narcissism describes what happens to a group of people who share an identity of some sort, whether they belong to a particular church, a particular political party, a particular racial, ethnic, or some other kind of identity category, LGBTQ+, for example. And it's characterized by an excessive self-regard for members in the group, but importantly, it's characterized by a high level of hostility and moral judgment for those outside the group. And it's also preoccupied with ensuring that the members of the in-group, your favored group, that they are sufficiently recognized publicly in front of other people as being higher on the moral hierarchy. They see themselves as special. Narcissism, it's right in the name, collective narcissism. And I think that we are all falling prey to collective narcissism in this society. Above and beyond the people who are actually fully diagnosable narcissists, this is something that's happening to most of us in one way or another that we have to be careful of. So keep that concept in mind, because I think it's going to inform some of the things we talk about today. So let's move on to some COVID stuff. It's so frustrating. Before I came in here today, I was about to drive to downtown Burlington, and then I remembered the headline on the newspaper I saw on the newsstand. The Burlington City Council, as I told you last week, responded to the governor's new law allowing cities and towns in Vermont to declare mask mandates by immediately declaring a mask mandate in Burlington. We are almost 2 years into this. I'm not even going to call it a pandemic anymore. The pandemic is over. It's over. It's not politically over, but it's factually over. And in fact, it never was the pandemic that we were told. Wasn't. Sorry. No. I'm going to disagree with some of my friends here too. No, this was not the worst pandemic we've seen in 100 years. Incorrect. No, it wasn't. It was sold that way, but it wasn't. And no, 800,000 Americans did not die specifically of COVID. Sorry. So I'm driving in to downtown Burlington, and I realize it's been months and months since I've had to wear a mask anywhere, but now I have to do this again. So I have to stop at a store and buy a bloody cloth mask that does absolutely nothing because I have business to do in downtown Burlington when we're done. And I'm seeing compliance go back up again. I'm seeing more and more people wearing masks outdoors. I told you during the summer that a lot of this had stopped. It's ticking back up again. Voluntarily doing it, walking around outside, single people all by themselves, walking dogs, wearing masks, putting on their masks before they go into the store. Even the stores outside the city of Burlington, even the ones that don't require a mask, people are, well, I'm doing my duty. I'm going to put it on anyway. So I'm not looking forward to this because I'm even more ornery than I was a few months ago. And I'm going to be publicly commenting on this and probably irritating other shoppers by asking aloud why everyone else is so afraid to actually say no. They want us scared because this is the biggest control. This pandemic, so to speak, has been the biggest collective hard-on that our politicians, policymakers, and media have had in living memory. Not just this generation, my entire life. This is more power than they have ever had, and they do not want to let it go. So, what's next? The Omicron variant. Give something a Greek letter in the name and it automatically becomes more serious to people. I'm not sure why. So far as I've seen, the Omicron variant appears to be the common cold. Nobody's died from. I'm seeing stories on the mainstream media. Omicron is here, though officials say no one has yet died from it. Oh, for God's sake. Well, Governor Kathy Hochul in New York was, I think, the first one out of the gate. She declared a state of emergency a week ago to prepare for the Omicron variant coming into New York. So her state of emergency, and when a governor invokes a state of emergency, it trips a bunch of mechanisms that free up funding for certain projects. I mean, there are administrative levers that get pulled under such a declaration. But she decided that part of this, in addition to freeing up whatever funds she thinks she needs for whatever she thinks she needs them for, to limit elective surgical procedures at hospitals in front of the Omicron variant, which looks like the common cold, which nobody has died from, and there is no evidence that people are going to die in droves from it. She's just decided, okay, emergency, no elective procedures at hospitals that might get overwhelmed. Which hospitals? Which hospitals are overwhelmed? I keep hearing about them and I don't see them. I don't see any of the hastily constructed outdoor tent hospitals that we've seen around many of our cities. None of them have been used. But she's protecting you. That's your governor doing governor things. Meanwhile, on the national stage, you'll recall that President Joe Biden is trying to issue a vaccine mandate for all workers in the private sector who work at an employer that has 100 employees or more, and also has one aimed at healthcare workers who work in facilities that receive federal funding. I'm going to give you some updates. These come from an article in the Louisville Courier-Journal. Thank you, Courier-Journal. You actually produced an article that was very easy to read and had a lot of good factual information right at hand. So, it says, the Biden administration issued separate federal rules mandating different types of workers to either be fully vaccinated or regularly tested. First, all federal contractors would be required to have their employees fully vaccinated by January 4th. Remember, fully vaccinated is a moving target. It gets redefined every day. Now we're up to that requires 3 shots, 2 vaccinations, and a booster. I don't know what fully vaccinated will be in a couple of weeks, but if you are fully vaccinated today, you will not be in a couple of weeks. You know this, right? You've noticed it. Please tell me you've noticed it. Back to the article. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services issued an emergency regulation that would require all staff at medical providers serving patients in federal programs to receive at least 1 dose of the vaccine by December 6th and be fully vaccinated by January 4th. If implemented, the vaccine would cover 17 million healthcare workers. Then, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, also issued a new rule requiring workers at companies with more than 100 employees to be fully vaccinated by January 4th or face regular testing going forward. And I'll bet face means pay for, too. This OSHA rule would apply to about 80 million workers. Finally, Joe Biden also issued a mandate for nearly 4 million direct federal employees to be fully vaccinated by last Monday, and that has not been blocked by the courts. There has been some court response, however. U.S. District Judge Gregory von Tattenhove of Kentucky's Eastern District issued a preliminary injunction to temporarily block the mandate on federal contractors in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Ohio, the 3 states whose attorneys general filed the lawsuit last month. As for the vaccine mandate of healthcare workers, a nationwide preliminary injunction was also issued this past Tuesday by a federal judge in Louisiana, following a ruling a day earlier from another federal judge that blocked it in 10 states. So where that brings us is Biden's mandates are currently blocked under injunctions. These court cases will go forward and this may change, but that's where we're sitting right now as we record this show. The Courier-Journal also notes that the lawsuit challenging the mandate on healthcare workers that led to this nationwide injunction was led by Louisiana's Attorney General and joined by Attorneys General of 13 other states. And also the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals also issued a nationwide injunction on the OSHA vaccine and testing rule affecting businesses with more than 100 workers. So these things cannot be enforced right now. That may change in the future, and we will keep up with it. And in the middle of all this, St. Fauci has been making the press rounds again because that is his full-time job. Let's take a look at a clip of Anthony Fauci earlier this week on CBS's Face the Nation.
Why do you feel so strongly about that, about staying on the job when you become, you were personally, not just rhetorically, threatened? Your security, your safety, your family.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
I dealt with it by focusing on what my job is. From the time that I went into medicine to the right now where I am at my age, my job has been totally focused on doing what I can with the talents and the influence I have to make scientific advances to protect the health of the American public. So anybody who spends lies and threatens and all that theater that goes on with some of the investigations and the congressional committees and the Rand Pauls and all that other nonsense, that's noise, Margaret. That's noise. I know what my job is.
Senator Cruz told the Attorney General you should be prosecuted.
Yeah. I have to laugh at that. I should be prosecuted. What happened on January 6th, Senator?
Do you think that this is about making you a scapegoat to deflect from President Trump?
Of course. You have to be asleep not to figure that one out.
Well, there are a lot of Republican senators taking aim at this.
That's okay. I'm just going to do my job. And I'm going to be saving lives, and they're going to be lying.
It seems another layer of danger to play politics around matters of life and death.
Right, exactly. And to me, that's unbelievably bad, because all I want to do is save people's lives. Anybody who's looking at this carefully realizes that there's a distinct anti-science flavor to this. So if they get up and criticize science, nobody's going to know what they're talking about. But if they get up and really aim their bullets at Tony Fauci, well, people could recognize there's a person there, so it's easy to criticize. But they're really criticizing science, because I represent science. That's dangerous. To me, that's more dangerous than the slings and the arrows that get thrown at me. And if you damage science, you are doing something very detrimental to society long after I leave.
I love it. You know what I hear? Listen, if you criticize me, you're criticizing science because I represent science. I'm Argentina and always will be. I am science. I am science. This guy's creepy. Did you hear that? Did you see that creepy laugh? That creepy, self-regarding laugh. The confidence of a narcissist is what that is. I should be prosecuted. What happened January 6th? What? That was like a record scratch. What? This is nuts. What is he suggesting? It's so laughable that he, Tony Fauci, should be prosecuted when there's significant evidence that he's lied about helping to fund gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab. that he's been lying to the public about things he knows aren't true, like the fact that he knows masks don't do a fucking thing. That email trove that came out earlier this year, he's contradicted everything he said in private communications at the beginning of this pandemic. And it's just laughable that he's a liar who should be prosecuted for lying to Congress. What, should Ted Cruz be prosecuted? Should Rand Paul be prosecuted? You know why he can be this confident? Because look at the media. Look at this woman interviewing him. I don't know who she is except that her first name is Margaret. This was more than a softball interview. This was like being interviewed by his own publicist. Isn't it like really dangerous to mix politics and life and death? I mean, it just seems really dangerous. You've been targeted. Is she on his goddamn payroll? What's going on with you, CBS? Is there nobody among you, CBS or the press in general, is there no one among you who is offended that this man has lied to you? You and me, ordinary people who aren't Tony Fauci. We're the regular citizens and taxpayers of this country. We may not agree on politics, you and I. But when public officials abuse trust, they're abusing your trust too, not just me. We're not on teams opposing each other on this. We're in the same boat. He's lied to you too. Why don't you care? Why are you helping him? I don't understand this. But this isn't normal. It's not normal for this superannuated garden gnome who's 80 years old and should not be in the position of power that he's in. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm saying it out loud. 80 years is too old. You are too old. It's too old to be president, and it's too old to be at the top of the food pyramid when it comes to health policy in this country. Why? What is it that people see in this guy? Anyway. Well, as bad as it is in the United States, it's worse in Australia. We've talked about this. We're going to talk about it again. But they're really going full-on fascist with this stuff in Australia. Take a listen to this news clip.
Teenagers who allegedly escaped quarantine at the Howard Springs facility near Darwin have been taken in by police. Following a 6-hour search, Nine's Talia Sav has the latest for us.
Well, we can expect to see some changes implemented here at the Centre for National Resilience after 3 teenagers allegedly escaped. A search spanning several hours was sparked this morning after police say the group scaled a fence and fled Howard Springs around 4:30 a.m. Authorities located the teenagers about half a dozen kilometres away. It's understood they travelled by foot and didn't mingle with anyone else. The 15, 16 and 17-year-old are close contacts of a case from the remote community of Binjari near Katherine, who all tested negative to COVID yesterday. The Territory's Police Commissioner believes isolation and loneliness may have contributed to the trio taking off, empathising they're not used to living in their own units. CCTV will also now be increased across the site as well as bolstered internal security. The trio are expected to face a fine of $5,000 each.
Okay, so that was a quick clip. That was only about a minute. I want to break it down for you because it goes by really quickly, but I think there are things we need to notice here. First of all, did you see the size of that camp? Did you catch that overhead? I was going to say a helicopter shot, but of course now being old, I forget. Not helicopter, drone shot. Did you see the size of that camp? It's enormous. It's the size of a small town at the very least. And did you catch the name for it? The Howard Springs Center for National Resilience. Do 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 do. Wow. Center for National Resilience. It's not a concentration camp, though. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not a concentration camp. It's not. That's been the big dust up on social media for the past couple of weeks. We Americans are all crazy for looking at something like this and comparing it to concentration camps, internment camps for the Japanese during World War II, or if we're really super bad and super histrionic, and we really just want to steal the heritage of Jewish people, we might dare to compare it to concentration camps and the beginning of them in World War II. But of course we can't do that because we're not crazy, are we? 3 teenagers arrested. A phalanx of police officers spreading out to arrest 3 teenagers who left a quarantine camp. And why were they there? Because they were close contacts of a case of COVID. Did you hear also that they all tested negative? That shouldn't matter, though. I want to point out the excess absurdity, but I want to make this very clear. No, it would not have been okay if they tested positive. That wouldn't have been, oh, okay, then they should be in the camp. No, no, no. That's the crazy part. But it's even crazier that they didn't even bloody have it. And listen to how they rationalize it. Officials said that isolation and loneliness contributed to why they wanted to leave the camp, because they're not used to living in their own unit. Really? It was isolation and loneliness, and they were just anxiety-ridden because they're not used to living in their own apartment. Couldn't possibly be that they weren't used to being imprisoned, could it? Reminds me of that, what we talked about last week, where the mother who was forcing her kid to get puberty blockers, and she said, and he cried all the way home because he was releasing his stress. No, it wasn't because he was releasing his stress. He was crying because he was medically traumatized. These kids escaped not because they weren't used to living on their own and they got lonely. They didn't want to be imprisoned. How long until this happens here? All right. That's enough on COVID for this week. And we're going to get into, this is going to straddle a couple of segments here, but I want to get into it before we take the next break. I want to talk about racism from black people, anti-white racism from black people that is becoming more and more common. And the very fact that I just said racism from black people would be enough to make anyone casually coming across this channel instantly get emotionally angry. Because black people can't be racist, right? Because the new definition of racism isn't just a prejudice against someone because of their skin color. It also has to mean that they have power. So racism is power plus prejudice. You can't be racist if you don't have power against somebody. So black people can say all sorts of horrible things about white people, but because black people have no power, they can't be racist. It's not racism. And it's racist for you to say that they can be racist. Okay? Bullshit. And don't tell me black people don't have any power. That's as ridiculous as telling me that the LGBTQ crowd doesn't have any power. They've got more power than anybody else in this goddamn country right now. This is an example that's 4 years old, but it is no less apt for being 4 years old. It's only gotten worse. I clipped this from my friend Mike Harlow's Facebook page. This was a post that was put up by a white ally 4 years ago after a Democrat won a state election in the state of Alabama. So we'll put this up on the screen and I'll read it to you. It's been 3 days since Alabama, that is the election of the Democratic official, and I'm still crying thinking how amazed I am by people of color and especially women of color. They take my breath away. I'm so thankful to the brave black and brown bodies in Alabama that saw what was happening and they stopped it. They did this for us. I'm so ashamed to be white, especially this week and this year. We are a plague. We are literally disgusting. People of color keep giving to us because that's just who they are, even though we've given them nothing but shackles. I hope everyone will use this to give thanks to communities of color. Do not expect a "you're welcome." Remember, guys, you are not entitled to anyone's unpaid emotional labor. Yesterday, I gave up my seat on a train to a person of color. Trains and buses are a great opportunity to step back and allow black folks to take up space. Today, my barista at the Starbucks was a black queer femme, so I tipped her the extra $1 I had. I wish I took the time to tell them. Yeah. Sorry. You are valid. You are important. Your life matters. You are safe with me, and I'm sorry. Oh, I'll say you're sorry, bitch. It can't begin to undo the damage of my whiteness, but daily affirmations towards people of color are an important part of allyship. And that, my friends, is an example of a Facebook post that was typed with only one hand. See you on the other side.
For more conversation on the dark and disordered psychology that shapes today's cultural and political left, subscribe to our weekly audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Google Podcasts, and virtually anywhere else you get your podcasts. Let's learn to recognize these dynamics and call them what they are. Subscribe to Disaffected to learn how to break the spell.
We now have a bonus for our supporters. You can help the Disaffected podcast grow and receive invitations for our off-air Zoom hangouts by becoming a supporting member on Patreon or Subscribestar. Patreon users, go to patreon.com/disaffected. Subscribestar users, you can find us at subscribestar.com/disaffected. Check out our webpage at disaffected.fm for the complete list of ways you can help support us. And thank you. Like, welcome back. This is a time when I'm going to ask you for money because, like, all this costs money and, like, we're so good, me and Kevin, that we totally deserve it. So what I'd like you to do is either go to patreon.com/disaffected or subscribestar.com/disaffected and totally sign up to give us money. And if you do, you're going to get invited to our special donor-only Zoom hangouts, and we're having one on December 12th. It's a Sunday. And we're going to watch Mommy Dearest. So, like, sign up and everything. Super thanks. You know, I could do a whole show like that, right? You know, that last thing we talked about before the break, that you are safe with me. I am sorry. I can't begin to undo the damage of my whiteness. It's a great example of collective narcissism. And I think it illustrates something that we've seen. There's a religious quality. It's like a Pentecostal charismatic Christian religious quality. It's the person who gets up and goes to the altar at the invitation to confess her sins. And she claims to be, you know, I'm fallen, I'm a sinner, I did all these terrible things, I was the absolute worst person in the world, but now I am bathed in the blood of the Lamb, and I'm wonderful and holy now. It sounds on the surface, the words sound self-deprecating, or they sound as if they're trying to express humility, but there is no humility in this. It's pure self-regard. And the people involved with this, you know, I'm going to talk here as I go into this subject matter about how comfortable some narcissistic Black people are today in being racist and, frankly, at least verbally violent. And I do mean violent. But it requires cooperation with the so-called white allies. They're in a dance with each other. In some ways, it's like the narcissist and his flying monkey who goes out and does his bidding. But in other ways, it's also co-abuse. They're abusing and exploiting each other. They're being patronizing to each other. They're reducing each other to caricatures and stereotypes, because the goal of people involved in this dynamic is not the issue itself. It's not racism. That's not what animates them. They may not even know that. They might even honestly say, yes, it's racism that I care about, but it isn't. It's self-regard. It's social positioning. It's narcissism. This is a narcissistic dynamic. And here's another example of what a good social living woke white people can make these days. By lying, and lying in the service of BLM or whatever the most prominent people of color lobby group is. Take a look at this cartoon. This is from a cartoonist, and he is white, I checked, named Rex Jones, and it's a Rittenhouse cartoon. On the left, you've got a white guy who's supposed to be Kyle Rittenhouse, although he looks like he's about 45 years old, not 18, holding a gun. And on the right-hand side are two black people. One of them is lying on the ground with a bullet hole in his chest, wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt. He's clearly been shot dead. He's bleeding. And a black woman is holding him up. And here's the dialogue from so-called Kyle Rittenhouse. I support Black Lives Matter. And the woman cradling the victim that he just shot. With supporters like you, who needs enemies? I mean, that's Rex, honey. Come on. You can do better. I mean, that's just shit, isn't it? That's just not even clever. But it's a lie. Kyle Rittenhouse didn't shoot any black people. He didn't. This is where we're at. I can't. There's nothing else to say about that. Let's move along. These people. They're not the good guys. All of you. These are not the good helpers. They're not. I was astonished on social media the past week looking at and listening to some of the conversations that are going on in so-called people of color spaces. There's something on Twitter actually called Spaces now. It's a voice chat room. Instead of typing, people actually come in and talk orally. You can join these conversations if you're invited to come in, or you can and participate, or you can just listen. So here's a couple of introductory images to one such space this week. First one is named White People Deserve Nuffin'. Share the space, child. And of course, white people, because this is the youth lingo, is spelled Y-T, white. They don't deserve nothing. And underneath that, it says this. Reminding myself that I don't give a fuck about the genocide of white people. Yes, all need to be exterminated immediately. You got to call the you guys look. No, I'm sorry, I can't parse that for you. Well, we have some audio. Let us listen.
First of all, Libs of TikTok, let me tell you something. If you're in here or y'all go run back and tell them, y'all ain't got to tell them that nobody else said shit but me. I'm going to say, listen, you ain't got to chop shit up. I am for the white genocide. I am for the total erasure of the white race. You don't have to chop this up. Yes, I am for all of you white bitches dying like flies. I am for it. I am for it. I support it. I'm for putting all you white possums in a gas chamber and letting that motherfucker ring, bitch. I am for it. So you don't have to chop shit up. I'm for it, and I'm going to stand 10 toes down behind it, bitch. Simple as that. So you got to chop shit up. You ain't got to screw the shit. Bitch, I said it, and I stand on it. Simple.
Yeah, simple is right. I am for the extermination of the white race. I am for it, bitch. Oh, I'm not supposed to do that, am I? I'm not supposed to affect a black accent because that's racist, isn't it? Piss off. Listen to these people. Listen to this. This is amazing. It's not that I think these sentiments don't exist. It's not that I think they're new and that, nobody has ever acted this way or said these things. It's not new. What's new is that people are confident enough to do this in public. They advertise this publicly on social media. They have no problem with people hearing them say this. This guy has no trouble having people hear him say, yes, he does want white people killed. He does want the genocide of white people. He does think of them as possums that need to go into a gas chamber. Now, what's interesting, it isn't really that interesting. It's very predictable. What's interesting is if this had been a white person talking about a black person, this would be the only topic I'd be able to cover on the show today because it would be wall to wall on all media. People would be out, and rightfully, they would be righteously outraged. Don't tell me that any of these potatoes like Brian Stelter on CNN or any of those other narcissists like Rachel Maddow or Joy Reid or Keith Olbermann or whoever the hell else is commentating on this stuff all the time. Don't tell me they didn't notice this. They didn't not notice this. They noticed it. But they're not going to talk about it because it's okay to say if you're part of the sacred cast. Other boldness that we wouldn't have expected to see until recently from Black people. This is a series of tweets by a woman who was adopted, and she wrote a memoir about her adoption. This is a Black woman. Her name is Rebecca Carroll. She was apparently adopted by a white family, and she's commenting on Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who has adopted children, some of whom are Black. And I believe this was brought up because the case that's in front of the Supreme Court this week on abortion, which has the potential to either affirm and uphold or overturn the Roe versus Wade decision. And I'm of a mixed mind about this, the topic of adoption. I don't know a great deal about it, but what I have noticed and what I have learned from talking to adopted people, there does seem to be a correlation between being adopted and childhood trauma or later psychiatric problems. And I'm not saying that the adoption caused these. It could be that early childhood experiences with the birth family were traumatizing to the child, and those problems carried over for the adoptive parents to deal with. It could also be that, you know, in some way the separation from your birth family, even if you think a baby doesn't know it, there could actually be something going on there that breaks a bond that can cause trouble later. I think we need to be open to hearing from people who were adopted that although adoption may be the much better option to languishing in, well, we don't call them orphanages anymore, but that's what they are. Yeah, that may be the better option, but I think we need to be able to hear that there may be problems that correlate pretty strongly with adoption that we haven't dealt with already. So having said all that, excuse me, this one is a little more disturbing. Let me read you a couple of Rebecca Carroll's tweets. My memoir, Surviving the White Gaze, which came out earlier this year, is not just my story about the enduring trauma of being adopted into a white family, but an excavation of the chillingly foundational dynamic of transracial adoption in America. Next one. Amy Coney Barrett's callous suggestion that birth mothers just gestate children and then give them up for adoption is sadly emblematic of that foundational dynamic, that she is an adoptive mother of 2 Black children, all the more so. I didn't hear the particular quote that Rebecca Carroll is referring to. It's possible, but I doubt, that I would have interpreted Amy Coney Barrett, whatever she said, to be a callous suggestion that birth mothers just gestate children and give them up for adoption. I mean, yeah, that's put in a sort of tendentious way that I bet would look a little different. Can't be sure. Next one. If her remarks don't awaken you to the potential repercussions of continuing this dynamic without a rigorous interrogation of how transracial adoption works, please reconsider and spend some time thinking about it. And another one. If Colin in Black and White, I'm not sure what that is, it may be a book, didn't make you think about the collateral damage of ill-prepared white adoptive parents, the half of which I'm quite sure we didn't even see in this very poignant series, please reconsider and spend some more time thinking about that. I'll read you a few more. Amy Coney Barrett, in her stance here alone, has already damaged the psyches of her Black adoptive children, has already made them feel like their origin stories were transactional, that she saved them from heartless Black vessel. Barrett is the white gaze incarnate, but she is not the only form of it. My adoptive white parents were well-intentioned, liberal, educated people. They created what they thought was an idyllic world, but it was through their gaze, which meant a raceless existence. Really? I don't know her family. I don't know her adopted family or her birth family. And yeah, I have seen cases where adoptive parents appear to be selecting the kinds of children they adopt for the social credit that they will get for adopting an unfortunate child. I do think that happens, and maybe that happened in Rebecca Carroll's family. But this looks different to me. This looks like a real vendetta. She might be right to have a vendetta. I mean, maybe she was ill-treated. I don't know. She might have been. But to say that it seems to me that she's saying that the very act of cross-racial adoption is itself some sort of terrible harm, that the adoptive parents have done you a disservice is really disturbing to me. And the last tweet in this series says this: the casual nonchalance of this thinking, the sheer staying power of their obtusity, is what I continue to grapple with, which they can either choose to engage with or not. White adoptive parents can choose to engage with the borderline racist dynamic of transracial adoption. First of all, I'm sorry, but Miss Carroll, you are a terrible writer. You write like somebody who wants to make herself sound like a smart person, but who isn't actually very educated. Obtusity? You need an editor, even for your Twitter. White adoptive parents can choose to engage with the borderline racist dynamic of transracial adoption. So adopting outside of your race is itself, without anything else qualifying it, is itself borderline racist. What would you have people do? Would it have been better not to be adopted? Assuming that your mother was not going to keep you, what would have been the better outcome? There's more to this story. I wish I knew what the more was, but it's more than this. And this doesn't look like a healthy response to me. This looks like somebody who spends her life collecting wounds and wants to be recognized for being wounded and fits everything into that lens. Let's move on to trans. It's another example of the collective delusion that we're all living in, that's enforced by our media and by our silence and our tacit support of this narrative, pretending that fake things are real, pretending that people are having feelings that they're not having. This is from the online publication LGBTQ Nation. Headline: Elliot Page's new Instagram thirst trap has Twitter drooling. Really? Let me explain a little bit for you old people like me. A thirst trap is the very current lingo for somebody posting a sexy picture. It traps people who are thirsty for this hot body. It'll be gone in a couple of months. There'll be a new name for it. Elliot Page, of course, is Ellen Page, a troubled woman in her early to mid-30s who has recently transitioned to become Elliot. And here she is. Take a look at her on the screen. This is her thirst trap picture that we're all drooling for. We've got a shirtless munchkin here. She's probably all of 5'1", maybe 95 pounds, in sweatpants, standing there with her shirt off, looking, quote, ripped. And you know why she looks ripped? I can't say this for certain, but I've watched this process from the first time I saw a shirtless pic. I think she got some sort of implants. I don't think those abdominal muscles are real. I think they're implants. I can certainly see that her pectorals are not real because I can see the mastectomy scars where she got her tits cut off. This is not a well woman. Not a well woman. Not sexy. Not hot. Not drool-worthy. Troubled. Self-mutilating. Ellen Page. Ellen Page is the cutter you remember from high school in the 90s. She's the girl who cuts herself, burns herself with cigarettes. That's what this is. Not hot. Self-harm. Cutter. LGBTQ nation, though, thinks it's different. Page's bona fides as a performer and activist weren't on anyone's mind after he published his thirst trap photo that radiated pride and confidence. Fire emojis quickly lit up Page's comments. And they get a quote for some users. "You're going to break that phone, though, with your intense hotness," filmmaker Ian Daniel replied. And then Twitter may have melted down. Yeah, Twitter just melted down. Oh my God, it's so great. I don't know if Twitter melted down, but I did go on a Reddit subforum for some kind of trans people. And it was hundreds and hundreds of comments. They were the most delusional thing I've ever seen. People were saying, "This is the happiest I've ever seen him. He looks so free. He looks so liberated. Oh my God, that's sexy. Look at the confidence." These people are not seeing the same thing that the rest of us are seeing. But I don't even know how to describe it. The worse it gets, the more damaging it is, the more traumatizing, the more grotesque, the more physically violent, the mutilating and maiming surgery, the more beautiful people call it. It's an exact reversal. It's very creepy. So let's spend a little time now on the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, CBC. Take a look at this teaser image that they put up for a recent story. And again, this one took up probably about 7 or 8 pages, all about how the language we use is unintentionally racist and harmful. So the teaser text says, "Have you ever casually used the term spirit animal, first world problems, or spooky? It might be time to rethink your use of these phrases and remove them from your daily lingo." I love the faux subtlety. It might be time means do it now, motherfucker, or I'll have you up against the wall. It might be time. Do you want to reconsider that? Or do you want me to decapitate you? So what are these problematic phrases that we should excise from our vocabulary? Quote, "CBC Ottawa compiled a small list of words submitted by readers and some of our journalists who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We ran some of the words by anti-racism and language experts who said some of these phrases can be hurtful to various groups of people for their historical and cultural context." Quote, "Being an English speaker doesn't entail that you necessarily know the racist etymology automatically," said I. Taniguchi, a linguist and associate language studies professor with the University of Toronto, Mississauga. "I didn't know it was racist does not eliminate the pain of the hearer," said Taniguchi. "As language users, we have the social responsibility to monitor the impact our utterances have on others, especially when it involves a marginalized group." So, first up, get this off your list. Blackmail, blacklist, and black sheep. Quote, "The issue here is that these are all negative terms," said Joseph Smith, an anti-racism trainer and educator. "It connotes evil, distrust, lack of intelligence, ignorance, a lack of beauty, the absence of white." Oh my God. For those of you who are listening and not watching, I'm making a masturbatory gesture. You're welcome. Black became associated with a particular group of people, and that group of people received all the negative connotations. That's why we try to move away from these kinds of terms. I won't be getting rid of blackmail, blacklist, and black sheep. Sorry, Mr. Smith. Or excuse me, MX Smith. Next one you got to get rid of. Spooky. Listen to this bullshit. The term spook, used sometimes to refer to a ghost, spy, or something that's strange and frightening, often used during Halloween, has a history of being an anti-black slur when white soldiers began calling fellow black soldiers as spooks during World War II. It's offensive because of who and to what it's applied to, said Smith. Remember, he's an anti-racism educator and trainer. He reminds people a lot is packed into certain terms you may use flippantly. Okay? Who is spooky hurting? Casper? Rundown Victorian houses? Now we got to get rid of grandfathered in. Likewise, the phrase grandfathered in, oh my God. Again, I'm sorry, guys. This writing is so bad. It's such shit writing. Listen to likewise, the phrase grandfathered in, modernly referring to there is no such, modernly is not an adjective that anyone uses. It's not. This is just, do you have copy? They clearly don't have editors. How could they have editors when they don't have writers? These are people who can't write. All right, sorry. Modernly referring to someone or business being exempt from new rules and continuing operating dates back to a 19th century policy called the Grandfather Clause, which indirectly stopped Black Americans from voting by limiting eligibility to only those whose ancestors could vote. Here's a quote from Smith. It's also speaking to that patriarchy, a patriarchic family having supreme power over how things operate and manifest, and then possessing all the power and autonomy to make decisions and dictate the course of the future. But you're loading a boatload of shit onto a pretty tame phrase, aren't you, sweetie? I don't have time to go through all these. It's pages and pages. But they're also going after gypped and gypsy. I'm not even sure if I trust the etymology these people are using. Brainstorm, blindsided, and blind spot. And yes, you're not to use these because it refers to people who might have more intelligence than others. And it also refers to people who might not be able to see as well as others. And that's as descriptive as we can get because we can't use the term blind. Unbelievable. We are running out of time here. But I want to take just a minute to talk about something that I think is really important for women. We don't see it discussed very often. It's something shameful. It's something a lot of women, I would guess, probably don't even know is an issue for them. But this show aims to talk about things that we're not supposed to talk about, so I'm going to bring it to you. Ladies, winter vagina is coming. According to this women's magazine, 'tis the season. The ways cold weather can affect your body, from winter vagina to blood clots. Take it seriously. Winter is upon us. I got it backwards. Get a muffler for your muff. That's the show. Have a good week. I'll see you next time.
For more conversation on the dark and disordered psychology that shapes today's cultural and political left, subscribe to our weekly audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Google Podcasts, and virtually anywhere else you get your podcasts. Let's learn to recognize these dynamics and call them what they are. Subscribe to Disaffected to learn how to break the spell.
We now have a bonus for our supporters. You can help the Disaffected podcast grow and receive invitations for our off-air Zoom hangouts by becoming a supporting member on Patreon or Subscribestar. Patreon users, go to patreon.com/disaffected. Subscribestar users, you can find us at subscribestar.com/disaffected. Check out our webpage at disaffected.fm for the complete list of ways you can help support us, and thank you.